The room fell silent except for the cruel laughter that followed my husband's words. My wife? Oh, she's only good for cleaning the house and keeping quiet. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I remained frozen in my chair, my hands gripping the crystal wine glass so tightly I feared it might shatter, just like my dignity had moments before. My name is Cheryl Walters. I'm 65 years old, and I live in Denver, Colorado. For 43 years, I've been married to Eric Walters, the man who just reduced my entire existence to that of a glorified housekeeper in front of his business partners. The elegant dining room of our $2.8 million home suddenly felt like a prison, its mahogany walls and expensive artwork mocking the emptiness I felt inside. Tonight was supposed to be special. Eric had invited his business partners from Walters & Associates Construction for what he called an important celebration dinner. I had spent the entire day preparing, ordering catering from the finest restaurant in Denver, arranging fresh orchids throughout the house, and selecting the perfect wine from our collection. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had orchestrated my own humiliation. The laughter from the men around our dining table continued to ring in my ears. James Morrison, Eric's partner for over 20 years, slapped the table and wiped tears from his eyes. "Eric, you crack me up. A quiet wife, that's every man's dream." The younger partners, hungry for approval, joined in with their own degrading comments about wives being seen and not heard. I had known this moment would come eventually. For years, I had endured Eric's increasingly disrespectful behavior, his dismissive attitude toward my contributions to our marriage and his business. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been quietly building something of my own. For the past 15 years, while he thought I was just cleaning house and keeping quiet, I had been investing the $850,000 inheritance from my father's estate into real estate ventures across Colorado. My late father, Theodore Manning, had been a brilliant businessman who taught me everything about investments and property development before his death in 2010. "Cheryl," he used to say, "a smart woman prepares for the storm while others are enjoying the sunshine." His words echoed in my mind as I sat there, absorbing every humiliating word from Eric and his colleagues. The dining room clock chimed 8:30, and I could see Eric basking in the attention, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. He raised his glass of our finest Cabernet, a $300 bottle from our wine cellar, and proposed a toast. "To silent wives and successful businesses." The men roared with approval, their voices echoing off the vaulted ceilings. But then I heard footsteps in the marble foyer, heavy, confident footsteps that I recognized immediately. My heart began to race, not with fear, but with anticipation. The moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would change everything, was finally here. The massive oak doors to the dining room opened slowly, and silence fell like a heavy curtain. A distinguished gentleman in an expensive navy suit entered, his presence commanding immediate attention. Every head turned toward him, and I watched as the color drained from Eric's face faster than wine from an overturned glass. "Good evening, everyone," the man said with a warm smile, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Eric stumbled over his words, nearly dropping his wine glass. "Mr. Richardson, we weren't expecting you tonight. I thought our meeting was scheduled for tomorrow morning." Mr. Richardson, Robert Richardson, CEO of Richardson Development Group, one of the largest construction and development companies in the western United States, walked around the table with measured steps. His eyes briefly met mine, and I saw the hint of a knowing smile before he turned back to the group of stunned men. "Plans change, Eric," Mr. Richardson said, pulling out an empty chair. "I decided to stop by tonight because I wanted to personally meet someone very special." He settled into his seat and looked directly at me, his expression respectful and professional. "Have you gentlemen met the new manager?" The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the distant hum of the refrigerator, even the sound of my own heartbeat. Eric's face had gone from pale to ashen, and his business partners looked around the table in confusion, their earlier confidence evaporating like morning mist. "Manager?" James Morrison finally managed to croak out. "What manager?" Mr. Richardson's smile widened as he gestured toward me. "Mrs. Cheryl Walters, of course, the new manager of our joint Colorado expansion project. Didn't Eric tell you about his wife's remarkable business portfolio?" I could practically hear the wheels turning in their heads as they tried to process this information. Eric's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and the younger partners shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly very interested in the pattern on their dinner plates. The moment hung suspended in time, pregnant with possibility and revenge. This was my moment, the culmination of years of planning, years of being underestimated, years of being dismissed as nothing more than a quiet housewife. The revolution I had been silently orchestrating was about to begin. And if you're watching this story unfold and feeling the tension just like I did that night, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. I'd love to know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Your support means everything to me as I share this incredible journey of transformation and empowerment. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. I could see the confusion and dawning realization in Eric's eyes as Mr. Richardson's words sank in. For 43 years, my husband had seen me as nothing more than an accessory to his life, beautiful, well-dressed, and conveniently silent. But tonight, that carefully constructed facade was crumbling faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Mr. Richardson turned to face the table full of stunned men, his expression professional, yet somehow amused by their obvious discomfort. "Gentlemen, I believe there's been a significant oversight in your understanding of the business landscape here in Colorado. Mrs. Walters didn't just inherit money 15 years ago. She's been actively building one of the most impressive real estate portfolios in the state." Eric's wineglass slipped from his fingers, the red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood from a wound. "Cheryl, what is he talking about?" His voice was barely above a whisper, but the hurt and confusion in his tone was unmistakable. I had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, I felt a strange calm wash over me. Standing slowly, I smoothed my navy dress, a $2,000 designer piece that Eric had always complimented, never knowing I had purchased it with my own money from my own business account. "What Mr. Richardson is talking about, Eric, is the 47 properties I currently own across Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. The commercial buildings in downtown Denver that generate $180,000 monthly in rental income. The apartment complexes in Boulder that I purchased and renovated while you thought I was attending book club meetings." My voice was steady, controlled, each word carefully measured for maximum impact. James Morrison's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. 47 properties? That's impossible. Eric, you would have known about something like that. The financial disclosures, the tax implications. I couldn't help but smile at his assumption. "I maintained separate accounts, James. Everything was perfectly legal and properly documented. My financial advisor, Margaret Chen, perhaps you know her from Chen & Associates Financial Planning, helped me structure everything to maintain complete independence from Eric's business affairs." Mr. Richardson nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Walters approached Richardson Development Group 6 months ago with a proposal for our Colorado expansion. Her portfolio's value, combined with her intimate knowledge of the Denver market, made her the ideal partner for our project. We're looking at an initial investment of $12 million with projected returns exceeding $35 million over the next 5 years. Eric's business partner, David Harrison, a man in his 40s who had spent the earlier part of the evening making jokes about women knowing their place, suddenly found his voice. "But Eric, surely you knew about your wife's investments." The look Eric gave me was a mixture of betrayal, shock, and something that might have been admiration buried deep beneath the hurt. "No," he said quietly. "I had no idea." "Of course you didn't," I replied, my years of suppressed anger finally finding a voice. "For the past 15 years, every time I tried to discuss financial matters, you told me not to worry my pretty little head about business. Every time I mentioned an idea or observation about the market, you patted my hand and changed the subject to something more appropriate for a wife to discuss." The memory of those countless dismissals fueled my confidence as I continued. "When I wanted to attend real estate seminars, you said it was a waste of time. When I expressed interest in investment opportunities, you laughed and said I should stick to charity work and home decoration. So I did exactly what you wanted, Eric. I kept quiet. But silence doesn't mean inactivity." Mr. Richardson cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Walters has proven to be one of the most astute business minds I've encountered in 30 years of development work. Her analysis of market trends and her ability to identify undervalued properties is remarkable. When she presented her expansion proposal to our board, it was unanimously approved within 24 hours. The younger partners, Kevin Sanders and Michael Torres, both fresh out of business school and full of arrogance just hours earlier, now sat in stunned silence. Their earlier comments about wives being decoration pieces for successful men echoed in the air like an embarrassing confession. Eric finally found his voice again, though it cracked with emotion. "Cheryl, I don't understand. If you had this kind of money, this kind of success, why didn't you tell me? We're married. We're supposed to be partners." The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. "Partners, Eric? Is that what we were when you introduced me tonight as someone who's only good for cleaning the house and keeping quiet? Is that what we were when you made decisions about our finances, our home, our life together without ever consulting me?" I walked around the table slowly, feeling more powerful with each step. The $850,000 inheritance from my father was just the beginning. In 15 years, I've turned that into a portfolio worth $18.7 million. The renovation of the Victorian house on Larimer Street that generated a $400,000 profit? Mine. The downtown office building that houses the law firm of Patterson and Associates? Mine. The luxury condos in Aspen that rent for $8,000 a week during ski season? Also mine. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock chiming 9 o'clock. Each chime seemed to mark another nail in the coffin of Eric's assumptions about our marriage and my capabilities. Mr. Richardson stood, smoothing his tie. "I should mention that Mrs. Walters will be relocating to our main office in downtown Denver to oversee the expansion project. She'll have a team of 12 professionals working under her direction, and her annual compensation package is $400,000, not including profit-sharing bonuses." Eric's face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, and finally, what looked like the beginning of panic. "Relocating? Cheryl, what does that mean? What about our home? What about our marriage?" I looked around the dining room one last time, at the expensive artwork I had chosen and purchased with my own money, at the crystal chandelier I had commissioned from a local artisan, at the mahogany dining set that had been my grandmother's. For years, I had thought of this house as our shared sanctuary. Tonight, I realized it had been my beautiful prison. That, Eric, is something we'll need to discuss. But first, I think you owe your guests an explanation about your wife, who apparently knows her place after all. The table of once confident businessmen sat in stunned silence, their earlier laughter replaced by the sobering realization that they had grossly underestimated the quiet woman they had mocked. The revolution had begun, and there would be no going back. The next morning arrived with the cruel brightness that only follows life-altering revelations. I woke up in the guest bedroom, a choice I had made deliberately after the dinner party ended in awkward, stammering apologies and hurried departures. Eric had tried to follow me upstairs, his voice pleading through the locked door until nearly midnight, but I had nothing left to say to him that night. Now, sitting at my antique writing desk with a cup of coffee and my laptop open to my investment portfolio dashboard, I felt the weight of the decision I had been postponing for months. The numbers glowing on the screen told a story of independence I had never dared to imagine when I first married Eric at 22. Back then, I thought love and companionship would be enough. How naive I had been. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Richardson. "Mrs. Walters, the contracts are ready for review. Would you prefer to meet at our office or yours?" The casual reference to my office sent a thrill through me. In just 3 weeks, I would have a corner office on the 32nd floor of the Richardson building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rocky Mountains and a salary that exceeded Eric's annual income. A soft knock at the bedroom door interrupted my thoughts. "Cheryl, may I come in?" Eric's voice carried none of its usual commanding tone. He sounded like a man who had spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the fragments of a life he thought he understood. I saved my work and closed the laptop. "Come in, Eric." He entered slowly, still wearing yesterday's rumpled shirt and pants. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, and the confident businessman who had dominated every room he entered for 4 decades looked diminished somehow, uncertain in his own home. "I've been thinking all night," he began, settling into the chair across from my desk without his usual presumptuous authority. "About what happened last night? About what Mr. Richardson said? About us." I waited, giving him the silence he had always demanded from me, but this time wielding it like a weapon instead of accepting it as a prison. Eric rubbed his temples, a gesture I had seen him make countless times during difficult business negotiations. Cheryl, I need to understand. How did I not know? How did you manage to build something so significant without me having any idea? The question revealed more about his mindset than he probably realized. Even in his shock and confusion, he was focused on his own ignorance rather than my accomplishment. It wasn't that difficult, Eric. You never asked about my days. You never showed interest in how I spent my time or my inheritance. When the monthly statements from my investment accounts arrived in the mail, you handed them to me unopened, saying financial paperwork was my responsibility. You created the perfect conditions for your own blindness. He winced at the accuracy of my words. But surely there were signs. The money you spent, the clothes, the jewelry, all purchased with my own income from my own investments. The designer dresses you complimented, the jewelry you thought looked beautiful on me, even the car I drive, all paid for with money I earned while you thought I was arranging flowers and planning charity luncheons. Eric stood and began pacing, a habit from his business dealings when he was trying to solve a problem. The charity work. You told me you were volunteering with the Denver Women's Foundation. I was. I still am. But I'm not just a volunteer, Eric. I've been on their board of directors for 8 years. We've raised over $3.2 million for women's business development programs. I've helped 47 women start their own businesses through our microfinance initiative. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. You never asked for details about my little charity work because you assumed it was just another way for me to stay busy while you handled the real business of our lives. The color drained from his face as he processed this information. You've been living a completely separate life. No, Eric, I've been living my own life alongside the life you wanted me to live. There's a difference. My phone rang, the display showing Margaret Chen's name. I answered immediately. Good morning, Margaret. Cheryl, I have wonderful news. The Patterson building sale closed this morning. After all fees and taxes, your profit is $487,000. With the Richardson project moving forward and your other properties performing so well, your net worth just crossed the $20 million threshold. I could see Eric's face go pale as he overheard Margaret's words. $20 million. In his most successful year, Eric's construction company had generated $3 million in revenue, with his personal take-home being considerably less after expenses and employee salaries. Thank you, Margaret. Please transfer the funds to my primary investment account. I'll call you later to discuss the Parker property opportunity. After ending the call, I found Eric staring at me with an expression I had never seen before, something between awe and fear. $20 million? $20 million and growing. The Richardson project will likely add another $8 million to that over the next 5 years, assuming conservative growth projections. Eric sat down heavily, his head in his hands. I feel like I don't know you at all. You've never known me, Eric. You knew the version of me you wanted to see. Quiet, compliant, decorative. You never bothered to discover who I actually was beneath that surface. The silence stretched between us, filled with 43 years of assumptions, dismissals, and missed opportunities for genuine partnership. Finally, Eric looked up, his eyes red with unshed tears. What happens now, Cheryl? What happens to us? I had been preparing for this question, but it still felt surreal to be having this conversation. That depends on whether you're capable of seeing me as an equal partner, or whether you'll always see me as the subordinate you described to your colleagues last night. I was wrong. God, Cheryl, I was so wrong. Can you forgive me? The question hung in the air like morning mist, beautiful, but insubstantial. Forgiveness was one thing. Rebuilding a marriage based on mutual respect and equality was something else entirely. Forgiveness isn't the issue, Eric. The issue is whether you can respect the woman I actually am, instead of trying to force me back into the box you've kept me in for 4 decades. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from David Richardson Jr., the company's vice president. Mrs. Walters, the board would like to meet with you Thursday to discuss the Phoenix expansion opportunity. This could be your chance to oversee projects in 3 states simultaneously. As I read the message, I felt the future opening up before me like a flower in the sun, full of possibilities I had only dreamed about while playing the role of the perfect, silent wife. Eric saw my expression change as I read the text. You're really going to do this, aren't you? You're going to take the job with Richardson. I looked at him, this man I had loved, honored, and served for most of my adult life, and realized that the scared, uncertain person sitting in my guest room was a stranger to me. The confident, dismissive husband I thought I knew had been as much of an illusion as the quiet, submissive wife he thought he had married. Yes, Eric, I'm going to take the job. The question is whether you want to be part of my new life or whether you prefer to keep living in the old one. The revolution was accelerating, and there would be casualties along the way. The only question was whether our marriage would be one of them. 3 days later, I stood in the marble lobby of the Richardson building, wearing a charcoal gray suit that commanded respect, another purchase from my private accounts that Eric had never questioned. The building's 32 floors stretched above me like a monument to possibility, and for the first time in decades, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Margaret Chen met me at the elevator bank, her expression professional but warm. Are you ready for this, Cheryl? Once you sign these contracts, there's no going back to the quiet housewife routine. I smiled, pressing the button for the 32nd floor. Margaret, I've been ready for this for 15 years. I just needed the right opportunity to show it. The elevator doors opened to reveal a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the Rocky Mountains. My nameplate was already on the door. Cheryl M. Walters, Regional Development Manager. Seeing my name in gold letters on that door was more exhilarating than any jewelry Eric had ever given me. Mr. Richardson was waiting inside with 3 other executives, all of whom stood when I entered, a level of professional respect I had never experienced in Eric's business world. Mrs. Walters, welcome to Richardson Development Group. Are you ready to change the landscape of Colorado real estate? As I settled into the conference chair, my phone began buzzing insistently. Eric's name flashed on the screen repeatedly, but I let it go to voicemail. This was my moment, and I wouldn't let his panic diminish it. The contracts were comprehensive. A 5-year agreement with Richardson Development Group that included not only my $400,000 annual salary, but also profit-sharing opportunities, stock options, and a $50,000 signing bonus. As I reviewed each page, I felt the weight of financial independence settling around my shoulders like a magnificent cloak. The Phoenix expansion project we discussed yesterday, Mr. Richardson continued, would put you in charge of a $25 million development initiative. If you're interested, we could have you overseeing operations in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and Arizona by next year. $25 million. The number echoed in my mind as I signed my name with a pen that cost more than most people's monthly salary. In one signature, I had committed to managing more money than Eric had handled in his entire career. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Eric. Cheryl, James, and David are here. They want to talk. Please come home. I showed the message to Mr. Richardson, who frowned. Problems at home? Nothing I can't handle. My husband's business partners are probably trying to figure out how to salvage their relationship with Richardson Development Group now that they know who I really am. Mr. Richardson chuckled. Well, they can start by showing you the respect they should have been showing all along. You're about to become one of the most powerful women in Colorado real estate, Mrs. Walters. It's time people started treating you accordingly. An hour later, I pulled into the circular driveway of our home to find 3 cars parked outside: Eric's BMW, James Morrison's Mercedes, and David Harrison's Range Rover. Through the living room window, I could see the 3 men pacing like caged animals, their usual confidence replaced by obvious anxiety. I entered through the front door to find them in heated discussion. Their conversation stopped abruptly when they saw me, and the silence that followed was heavy with tension and unspoken desperation. James Morrison, who had laughed the loudest at Eric's cruel joke 3 nights ago, stepped forward first. Cheryl, we owe you an apology. A sincere, heartfelt apology. You certainly do, I replied, setting my briefcase down and removing my gloves with deliberate precision. But I'm curious about the timing. Were you inspired by genuine remorse, or by the realization that I'm now your biggest potential client? David Harrison shifted uncomfortably. Both, if we're being honest. Cheryl, we had no idea about your business portfolio. If we had known, you would have treated me differently? I interrupted. How convenient. So, my worth as a human being is determined by my financial portfolio rather than basic decency? Eric finally spoke up, his voice strained with emotion. Cheryl, They want to make this right. We want to make this right. I looked around the living room, where we had entertained these same men dozens of times over the years, always with me playing the perfect hostess while they discussed business as if I weren't in the room. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice carrying the authority I had learned from watching Mr. Richardson command his boardroom. "I'm going to tell you exactly how you can make this right, and then you're going to decide whether your pride is more important than your business relationships." The three men exchanged glances before James nodded. "We're listening. First, you're going to publicly acknowledge that your behavior toward me was inappropriate and disrespectful. Not because I'm a wealthy woman, but because I'm a human being who deserved better treatment regardless of my financial status." David Harrison winced but nodded. "Agreed. Second, you're going to examine how you treat the other women in your lives, wives, daughters, female employees. Because if you treated me this way, you're probably treating other women the same way." I could see Eric flinch at this suggestion, and I wondered if he was thinking about his own daughter, Sarah, who lived in Seattle and called home less and less frequently each year. "Third," I continued, "if you want any consideration for future business opportunities with Richardson Development Group, you're going to prove that you understand the meaning of equal partnership by offering equity positions to any qualified women in your organization." James Morrison's face went pale. "Equity positions? Cheryl, that's a significant financial commitment. Less significant than losing access to a $25 million development project," I replied calmly. "Mr. Richardson has made it clear that Richardson Development Group only partners with companies that reflect our values of equality and respect." The room fell silent as the three men processed the implications of my demands. They were being asked to change not just their behavior, but their entire approach to business relationships. Eric stepped closer, his voice pleading. "And what about us, Cheryl? What about our marriage?" I met his eyes, seeing the man I had fallen in love with 43 years ago buried beneath decades of arrogance and casual cruelty. "That depends entirely on whether you're capable of seeing me as your equal partner instead of your subordinate. Can you handle being married to a woman who earns more than you do, who has more business success than you've achieved, who doesn't need your permission or approval for her decisions?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and I could see Eric wrestling with concepts that threatened everything he had believed about marriage, gender roles, and his own identity. James Morrison cleared his throat nervously. "If we agree to your terms, would you consider putting in a good word for us with Richardson Development Group?" I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the stairs. "I'll consider it. But understand this. My recommendation will be based on your actions going forward, not on your promises today. Respect isn't something you can negotiate or purchase. It's something you earn through consistent behavior over time." As I climbed the stairs to pack for my business trip to Phoenix, I could hear the three men beginning a hushed conversation about how to salvage their business relationships with my new company. For the first time in my marriage, I was the one holding all the cards, and the feeling was intoxicating. The revolution was no longer brewing. It was here, and I was leading the charge. 2 weeks later, I sat in my corner office on the 32nd floor, reviewing architectural plans for the Phoenix expansion project, when my assistant Linda knocked on my door. "Mrs. Walters, there's a Mrs. Patricia Walters here to see you. She says she's your mother-in-law." I looked up from the blueprints, my heart sinking. Patricia Walters, 78 years old, and every inch the traditional matriarch who had spent 43 years subtly undermining my marriage with her old-fashioned notions about a woman's place. If she was here, it meant Eric had called for reinforcements. "Send her in, Linda, and please hold my calls for the next hour." Patricia entered my office like a queen surveying a conquered territory, her eyes taking in every detail: the awards on my walls, the expensive furniture, the panoramic view of downtown Denver. She was dressed in her usual pearls and conservative suit, but there was something different about her expression. Where I expected disapproval, I saw something closer to curiosity. "Well, Cheryl," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without invitation. "This is quite the development." "Hello, Patricia. I assume Eric asked you to come." "He did. He's very worried about you, about your marriage, about this dramatic change in your circumstances." She paused, studying my face. "But I didn't come here to lecture you about your duties as a wife." This surprised me. Patricia had been lecturing me about my duties as a wife since the day Eric proposed. "Then why are you here?" Patricia removed her gloves slowly, a ritual I had watched her perform thousands of times during family dinners, where she held court over conversations about proper behavior and traditional values. Because I'm 98 years old, and I've learned a few things about marriage that I never shared with my son. I leaned back in my chair, intrigued despite myself. Patricia Walters had never been anything but critical of what she perceived as my modern attitudes and independent thinking. My marriage to Eric's father lasted 52 years, she continued, but it wasn't because I was the perfect, submissive wife everyone thought I was. It was because I learned how to get what I wanted without threatening his ego. The confession hung between us like a bridge neither of us had expected to find. What are you saying, Patricia? I'm saying that I've been watching you for 43 years, waiting for you to stop apologizing for being intelligent and start using that intelligence to its full potential. She opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder. I'm also saying that Eric doesn't know about the stock portfolio I've been building since 1965. She slid the folder across my desk, and I opened it to find investment statements showing holdings worth over $3.7 million. Patricia, I don't understand. While my husband thought I was spending my days planning garden parties and managing household staff, I was actually studying the stock market and making investments with money I saved from household expenses and gifts from family members. I bought IBM stock in 1967, Microsoft in 1986, and Google in 2004. I've been funding women's education scholarships anonymously for 30 years. I stared at the documents, feeling like I was looking into a mirror that reflected decades of hidden potential. Why are you telling me this? Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on an intensity I had never heard before. Because Eric called me crying yesterday, asking me to convince you to give up this career nonsense and come home where you belong. And I realized that I've spent my entire life watching intelligent women diminish themselves for the comfort of men who never deserved that sacrifice. The weight of her words settled over me like a revelation. You've been hiding your true self for 50 years? Longer than that. But watching you take control of your life has inspired me to stop hiding. She reached into her purse again and pulled out another document. This is why I really came here today. I looked at the paper and gasped. It was a business proposal for a women's investment fund, with Patricia Walters listed as primary investor and me as managing director. The proposed capital was $5 million. I want to partner with you, Cheryl, not because you're my daughter-in-law, but because you're the most capable businesswoman I know. I want to create an investment fund specifically designed to support women entrepreneurs, women who are tired of asking permission to pursue their dreams. I could barely process what I was reading. Patricia, this is incredible. But what about Eric? What about the family? Eric is a grown man who needs to learn that his wife's success doesn't diminish his own worth. And as for the family, I think it's time the Walters women stopped pretending to be less than we are for the comfort of the Walters men. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. Please come home. We need to talk. I've been thinking about everything you said. I showed the message to Patricia, who smiled. He's scared, Cheryl. Probably for the first time in his adult life, he's realized that his most valuable asset might walk away. I'm not an asset, Patricia. I'm a human being with my own goals and ambitions. Exactly. And it's time Eric learned the difference. She stood, smoothing her skirt. Think about my proposal. We could change the landscape for women in business across the entire country. After Patricia left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the Rocky Mountains and thinking about the conversation I would need to have with Eric that evening. In the span of 2 weeks, my life had transformed from that of a dismissed housewife to a powerful businesswoman with opportunities I had never dared imagine. My computer chimed with an email from David Richardson, Jr. Mrs. Walters, the Phoenix project has been approved by the City Planning Commission. Congratulations on your first major victory with Richardson Development Group. The potential for expansion into California and Texas just increased significantly. I printed the email and added it to my growing file of accomplishments. Proof that I was capable of far more than keeping house and staying quiet. The revolution that had begun with a humiliating dinner party was now reshaping not just my marriage, but my entire understanding of what was possible for my life. That evening, I would go home and face Eric with a new proposal of my own. But this time, the terms would be mine to set, and the future would be mine to define. The silent housewife was gone forever, and in her place stood a woman ready to change the world. I arrived home that evening, to find Eric waiting in the living room with what appeared to be a carefully prepared speech and a bottle of champagne, the same vintage we had shared on our wedding night 43 years ago. The gesture might have been romantic if it hadn't felt so desperately calculated. "Cheryl, I've been thinking about everything that's happened," he began as I set down my briefcase. "I know I've made terrible mistakes, and I want to make things right between us." I settled into the chair across from him, the same chair where I had sat in humiliated silence just 3 weeks ago. How much everything had changed since that night. "I'm listening, Eric. I've spoken to a therapist, Dr. Sarah Miller. She specializes in marriage counseling, and she's helped me understand how I've been failing as a husband." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "I want to learn how to be the partner you deserve." The words sounded genuine, but I had heard Eric deliver convincing presentations before. "What specifically have you learned, Eric?" He pulled out a notebook, something I had never seen him use for personal matters, and began reading. "I've learned that I've been treating you as an extension of myself rather than as an individual. I've learned that I've been dismissive of your intelligence and capabilities, and I've learned that my behavior has been emotionally abusive." The word abusive hung in the air between us. It was the first time Eric had ever acknowledged that his treatment of me had crossed beyond mere thoughtlessness into actual harm. "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Cheryl. I'm proud of your business success, your intelligence, your independence. I should have been supporting you all along, instead of trying to diminish you." I studied his face, looking for the calculation behind the words. "What do you want from me, Eric?" "I want us to start over, as equals, as real partners." He gestured toward the champagne. "I want to celebrate your success, instead of feeling threatened by it." My phone rang, Margaret Chen calling about the Phoenix project timeline. I answered without hesitation, discussing investment schedules and construction permits while Eric sat quietly, for once not interrupting a business call or showing impatience with my professional conversations. After ending the call, I found Eric watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're different," he said quietly. "You carry yourself differently. You speak differently. You're powerful." "I'm the same person I've always been, Eric. I'm just finally in a position where that person can be fully expressed." He nodded slowly. "I think that's what scares me most, the realization that I never really knew who you were." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I had designed and maintained for over 2 decades. Tomorrow, a landscape architect would meet with the new owners to discuss their vision for the space. Eric didn't know yet that I had listed the house for sale that afternoon. "Eric, I need to tell you something important. I've made a decision about our marriage, about our future, and about this house." The color drained from his face. "You're leaving me. I'm leaving this version of our marriage. Whether you join me in creating a new one is entirely up to you." I turned to face him directly. "I've accepted the Phoenix expansion project. I'll be spending 3 days a week in Arizona for the next 6 months. I've also partnered with your mother to create a women's investment fund that will require significant travel and time commitment." Eric's eyes widened. "My mother? Patricia is involved in your business? Your mother has been hiding her own business empire for 50 years, Eric. Did you know she's worth nearly $4 million? Did you know she's been funding education scholarships for women since the 1990s? He sank back into his chair, as if the wind had been knocked out of him. "No. I had no idea. The women in your life have been more than you ever bothered to discover. Your mother, your wife, probably your daughter Sarah as well. When was the last time you asked Sarah about her work at the architectural firm in Seattle? Do you even know she's being considered for a partnership?" Eric's face went ashen. "Partnership? Sarah never mentioned. Because you never ask her about anything more substantial than her health and the weather. Just like you never asked me about anything more important than dinner plans and social schedules." I sat down across from him again, my voice gentle but firm. "Here's what's going to happen, Eric. I've put the house on the market. My realtor believes we'll get close to $3 million for it, given the current Denver market. You can't sell our house without my agreement." "Actually, I can. I consulted with my attorney yesterday. The house was purchased with funds from my inheritance, and the deed is in my name alone. Something you never bothered to notice in 20 years of living here." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. "But this is our home, Cheryl. This is where we built our life together. This is where I built a beautiful prison for myself while you built a career on the assumption that I was nothing more than an attractive accessory to your success. I stood and walked to the antique secretary desk where I kept important papers. I have 2 proposals for you, Eric. You can choose either one, but you can't choose neither. Eric straightened, some of his old businessman's instincts kicking in. I'm listening. Proposal 1. We divorce amicably. I'll be generous with the settlement despite the prenup you insisted on. I'll give you 50% of the house sale proceeds and 50% of the value of the furniture and art. You keep your business, I keep mine, and we both move forward with our separate lives. I could see him calculating the numbers, realizing that 50% of my assets would set him up for life. And proposal 2? Proposal 2. We start over completely. New house, new relationship dynamic, new understanding of what marriage means. You attend marriage counseling with me for at least 6 months. You respect my career commitments and travel schedule. You never again refer to me or treat me as anything less than your equal partner. Eric was quiet for several minutes, staring at the champagne bottle he had opened with such hope. And if I choose proposal 2, what guarantees do I have that you won't leave anyway? The same guarantee I've had for 43 years, Eric. None. Marriage is a leap of faith every single day. The difference is that from now on, it will be a leap we take together as equals, or not at all. I handed him a folder containing the real estate listing for our house and the contact information for Dr. Sarah Miller. You have 72 hours to decide. After that, I'll assume you've chosen proposal 1 and my attorney will file the divorce papers. As I walked toward the stairs, Eric called after me. Cheryl, what if I choose proposal 2 but I fail? What if I can't change enough to be the husband you deserve? I paused on the stairs, looking back at this man who had been the center of my world for so many decades. Then at least we'll both know we tried. But Eric, understand this. I will never again pretend to be less than I am for anyone's comfort. The woman you married at 22 is gone. The woman you humiliated 3 weeks ago is gone. This is who I am now, and this is who I'll be going forward. The next morning, I would fly to Phoenix to oversee the groundbreaking ceremony for a project that would transform the skyline of an entire city. Whether Eric would be there to support me, or whether I would be building my new life alone, remained to be seen. But for the first time in my adult life, I was the one setting the terms, and that made all the difference in the world. 3 months later, I stood on the construction site in Phoenix, watching as the foundation for what would become the largest mixed-use development in Arizona's history was poured. The sight of concrete trucks and construction crews implementing my vision was more exhilarating than any anniversary celebration Eric had ever planned. My phone buzzed with a call from Patricia. Cheryl, dear, the Women's Investment Fund has approved its 15th startup. We're now supporting businesses across 12 states, and our total investment portfolio has reached $8.7 million. I smiled, adjusting my hard hat as I walked through the construction zone. That's incredible, Patricia. Which startup was approved today? A mother of 3 in Texas who's developed an innovative child safety product. She was turned down by 17 traditional investors who said her market research was emotionally biased. We'll be providing her with $200,000 in startup capital. The irony wasn't lost on me. A year ago, I had been dismissed as too emotional and too female to understand business, and now I was helping other women overcome those same prejudices. Mrs. Walters, called David Richardson Jr. from across the construction site. The City Planning Commission wants to fast-track approval for Phase 2 of the project. They're calling it the most innovative urban development proposal they've seen in decades. I ended the call with Patricia and walked over to David, who was reviewing blueprints with the lead architect. Phase 2 of the Phoenix project would add residential towers, retail space, and a community center designed specifically to support women-owned businesses. The economic impact was projected at over $150 million in the first 5 years alone. The fast-track approval means we can break ground on Phase 2 by January, David continued. Mrs. Walters, this project is redefining what's possible in urban development. You're not just building buildings, you're building communities. As we discussed timeline adjustments and material sourcing, I felt my phone vibrating with what I recognized as Eric's ringtone. Over the past 3 months, our conversations had followed a pattern. He would call to update me on his progress in therapy, his efforts to rebuild our relationship, and his growing understanding of how deeply he had wounded our marriage. I stepped away from the construction noise to take the call. Hello, Eric. Cheryl, I have some news. His voice carried an excitement I hadn't heard in years. I've been accepted into a partnership program with Richardson Development Group. Mr. Richardson called this morning. This was unexpected. What kind of partnership program? It's an initiative to work with smaller construction companies that meet their standards for workplace equality and business ethics. James, David, and I have spent the past 3 months completely restructuring our company. We've promoted 3 women to management positions, established an equity sharing program, and hired an HR consultant to review all our policies and practices. I was genuinely surprised. That's significant, Eric. It is. But more than that, Mr. Richardson said the partnership came with a strong recommendation from someone whose judgment he trusts completely. Eric paused. He said you recommended us, Cheryl. The conversation I'd had with Mr. Richardson 2 weeks earlier came back to me. He had asked about local contractors who might be suitable for smaller projects within the Richardson portfolio. I had mentioned Eric's company, but only after confirming that they had made genuine changes to their business practices. I told Mr. Richardson that if you were serious about changing, you had the experience and skills to be valuable partners. But I also made it clear that my recommendation was contingent on verified changes to how you treat people, especially women. We've done more than just change our policies, Cheryl. We've changed our entire culture. Sarah flew in from Seattle last week to review our employee handbook and interview our staff. She said she was proud of the progress we've made. The mention of his daughter surprised me. Sarah was involved in your business restructuring? She was, and she told me things about her own experiences with gender discrimination that I had never bothered to ask about. Did you know that she's been passed over for promotion twice because clients requested male architects? Did you know that she's earned 67% of what her male colleagues make despite having superior performance reviews? I had known, because Sarah and I had maintained a closer relationship than Eric realized. But hearing him acknowledge these realities marked a significant shift in his awareness. Sarah also told me that you've been mentoring her through the investment fund, helping her plan her own business startup. She said you've taught her more about financial independence in 3 months than I taught her in 32 years. This was true. Sarah Walters had inherited her father's business acumen and her grandmother's hidden intelligence. With the right support, she could build something remarkable. Eric, I'm proud of the changes you've made. But I need you to understand that this isn't about earning your way back into my good graces. This is about becoming the man you should have been all along. I know. Dr. Miller has helped me understand that my behavior wasn't just thoughtless, it was harmful. Not just to you, but to every woman I interacted with. I've been living in a bubble of male privilege that I didn't even recognize. A dust storm was approaching from the east, and the construction crew was beginning to secure equipment for the day. I needed to wrap up this conversation, but Eric's next words stopped me cold. Cheryl, I want to ask you something important. Will you marry me? We're already married, Eric. No, we're not. Not really. What we had was a traditional arrangement where you sacrificed your identity for my comfort. I want to marry the woman you actually are, the woman you've always been underneath the role you thought you had to play. I watched the dust storm approaching, thinking about the symbolism of clearing away the old to make room for something new. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we renew our vows, new ceremony, new promises, new understanding of what partnership means. I want to marry Cheryl Walters, the brilliant businesswoman who's changing the landscape of American real estate. I want to support your dreams instead of limiting them. The offer was tempting, but I had learned to distinguish between grand gestures and sustainable change. Eric, what happens the first time my success overshadows yours? What happens when I earn more money than you do, which is already happening? What happens when people introduce you as Cheryl Walters' husband instead of the other way around? There was a long pause before he answered. Then I'll be proud to be known as the husband of an extraordinary woman. Cheryl, you've already changed my life just by being yourself. You've inspired my mother to stop hiding her intelligence. You've motivated my daughter to pursue her dreams, and you've forced me to become a better man. How could I be anything but grateful for that? The dust storm was getting closer, and I could see the crew waiting for my signal to evacuate the site. I need to go, Eric. We're shutting down construction for the day. Of course. But Cheryl, will you think about what I've asked? Will you consider giving me, another chance? As I walked toward the construction trailer, I thought about the conversation I would have with Patricia that evening, about expanding the Women's Investment Fund into international markets. I thought about the call from a publisher who wanted me to write a book about women in real estate development. I thought about the future I was building, one decision at a time. I'll think about it, Eric. But understand that if we do this, it will be on equal terms. I won't be returning to our old life. I wouldn't want you to. That life wasn't worthy of either of us. That evening, as I sat in my Phoenix hotel room reviewing construction reports and investment proposals, I realized that the woman Eric was asking to marry was someone I was still getting to know myself. For 43 years, I had been so focused on being the wife he wanted that I had never fully explored who I could become. Now I was discovering that possibility every day, and it was more exhilarating than any romance I had ever imagined. The question was whether Eric could love the woman I was becoming, or whether he was still in love with the idea of transforming me back into someone he could more easily understand. The dust storm passed, leaving the Phoenix sky clear and bright, perfect conditions for building something new. 6 months after the Phoenix groundbreaking, I was in my Denver office when Linda buzzed the intercom with an urgent tone. "Mrs. Walters, there's a Mr. James Morrison and a Mr. David Harrison here to see you. They say it's about the Richardson partnership contract." I glanced at my calendar. My meeting with Eric was scheduled for lunch. We had been having weekly meetings as part of our marriage counseling process, carefully rebuilding trust and communication. But James and David showing up unannounced suggested something had gone wrong. "Send them in, Linda, and please reschedule my lunch appointment with Eric." The two men who entered my office were different from the confident businessmen who had laughed at Eric's cruel joke 8 months ago. James looked haggard, his usually perfect appearance rumpled and stressed. David's nervous energy was evident in the way he kept checking his phone and adjusting his tie. "Cheryl, we need to talk," James began without preamble. "There's been a development with the Richardson partnership that we need to discuss." I gestured to the chairs across from my desk, noting that neither man could quite meet my eyes. "I'm listening." David pulled out a thick folder and set it on my desk. "We've discovered some financial irregularities in Eric's company accounts. Money that was supposed to be allocated for the Richardson projects has been redirected." My blood ran cold. "What kind of irregularities?" James leaned forward, his voice tense with anxiety. "Eric has been borrowing against the Richardson contract to cover personal expenses. Nearly $400,000 has been transferred from the business account to his personal account over the past 4 months. I stared at the documents David had spread across my desk, bank statements, transfer records, and invoices for personal expenses that had been charged to business accounts. The evidence was damning and clear. "Personal expenses for what?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "The house he's been renovating," David replied quietly. "He bought a property in Cherry Hills Village, a $2.3 million house that he's been customizing. Apparently, he wanted to surprise you with it." The irony was staggering. While I had been working 18-hour days to build an empire that would support both our futures, Eric had been secretly spending money that wasn't his to impress a wife he had already lost. "There's more," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's also been making payments to an interior designer, a jewelry store, and a travel agency. It looks like he was planning some kind of grand romantic gesture." I felt the familiar anger rising, but this time it was tempered by something deeper. Disappointment so profound it felt like grief. "How much does Richardson Development Group know about this?" "Nothing yet," David said quickly. "We discovered the irregularities during our quarterly review yesterday. We wanted to talk to you first because we know how this will look to Mr. Richardson." The implications were clear. If Richardson Development Group discovered that their partner had been embezzling funds, the partnership would be terminated immediately. Eric's company would be ruined, and my recommendation would be called into question. "Where is Eric now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "He's at the Cherry Hills property with the contractors," James replied. "He doesn't know we've discovered the missing money yet." I stood and walked to my office window, looking out at the city that had become the foundation of my new life. In the distance, I could see the construction cranes working on the Richardson projects that were transforming Denver's skyline. Everything I had built, everything I had achieved, was suddenly at risk because of Eric's desperate attempt to buy his way back into my affections. "What do you want from me?" I asked, turning back to face them. James and David exchanged a look before David spoke. "We want you to talk to him. Make him understand that he needs to return the money immediately, before anyone else discovers what he's done. And if he can't return the money? The silence that followed answered my question. If Eric couldn't repay the $400,000, the scandal would destroy not only his company, but potentially damage my own reputation and business relationships. I picked up my phone and dialed Eric's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and excited. "Cheryl! Perfect timing. I'm at the house and the master suite is almost finished. I can't wait to show you." "Eric, I need you to come to my office immediately. James and David are here, and we need to discuss the Richardson partnership." The tone of my voice must have conveyed the seriousness of the situation, because Eric's enthusiasm immediately shifted to concern. "Is something wrong? Did Richardson change the terms of the contract? Just come to my office, Eric. Now." 20 minutes later, Eric burst through my office door with the energy of a man who had been running on hope and adrenaline for months. He stopped short when he saw James and David's grim faces and the bank statement spread across my desk. "What's this about?" he asked, but I could see in his eyes that he already knew. I held up one of the bank statements, my voice controlled but deadly serious. "This is about the $400,000 you've stolen from your business accounts to fund your fantasy of winning me back." Eric's face went through a series of emotions: shock, guilt, and finally, desperate justification. "I wasn't stealing, Cheryl. I was investing in our future. The house, the renovations. It's all for us. Money that belonged to Richardson Development Group projects, Eric. Money that you had no right to touch." I stood and walked around my desk to face him directly. "Did you really think you could buy me back? Did you think that after everything I've achieved, everything I've built, I would be impressed by a house purchased with embezzled funds?" Eric's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "I was desperate, Cheryl. I was losing you, and I didn't know how else to show you that I could be the husband you deserved. The husband I deserve would never steal from business partners. The husband I deserve would never jeopardize other people's livelihoods for his own romantic delusions." James cleared his throat nervously. "Eric, if you can return the money within 48 hours, we might be able to resolve this without involving Richardson. But if you can't..." Eric sank into a chair, his head in his hands. "I can't return it. Most of it has already been spent on the house renovations. The contractors, the materials, it's all been paid for." The room fell silent as the full magnitude of the situation settled over us. Eric had effectively destroyed his business, his partnership with Richardson Development Group, and quite possibly his last chance at reconciling with me. I sat down across from him, my voice gentle but firm. "Eric, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Mr. Richardson and confess everything. You're going to offer to sell the Cherry Hills house to repay the money, and you're going to accept whatever consequences follow." Eric looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "That will destroy everything, Cheryl. My company, my reputation, my partnership with Richardson. Everything I've built. Everything you've built was built on the foundation of disrespecting the people around you, including me. Maybe it's time to start over with integrity instead of ego." I stood and gathered the bank statements into a neat pile. "James, David, you need to decide whether you want to be part of Eric's problem or part of the solution. You can either support him through this crisis with honesty and accountability, or you can distance yourselves to protect your own interests." As the three men filed out of my office, Eric paused at the door. "Cheryl, does this mean we're finished? Does this mean there's no chance for us?" I looked at this man who had been the center of my world for so many years, who had transformed from a dismissive husband into a desperate romantic, and finally into a criminal willing to steal for love. "Eric, the man I thought I was falling in love with again would never have done what you've done. I don't know who you are anymore." That evening, I sat in my empty office as the sun set over Denver, thinking about the empire I had built and the price of loving someone who couldn't love me enough to respect the things that mattered to me. Tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to stand by Eric as he faced the consequences of his actions, or whether to protect the business empire I had worked so hard to create. The revolution had taken an unexpected turn, and the casualties were mounting. The next morning, I arrived at Richardson Development Group headquarters to find Mr. Richardson waiting in my office with a grave expression and a cup of coffee that had clearly gone cold hours ago. The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Eric had already called him. "Mrs. Walters, please sit down. We need to discuss the situation with your husband's company." I settled into my chair, maintaining the professional composure that had carried me through months of personal upheaval. Mr. Richardson, I want you to know that I had no knowledge of Eric's financial irregularities until yesterday afternoon. I believe you, Cheryl. Eric's confession this morning was quite thorough. He took full responsibility for his actions and made it clear that you were not involved in any way. Mr. Richardson leaned back in his chair, studying my face. The question is, what do we do now? I had spent most of the night thinking about this exact question. What did Eric propose? He's offered to sell the Cherry Hills property and use the proceeds to repay the money he took. He's also offered to dissolve the partnership with Richardson Development Group and accept legal consequences for his actions. The weight of Eric's situation, and its implications for both our personal and professional relationship, settled over me like a heavy blanket. And what are you inclined to do? Mr. Richardson stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline that bore the marks of our successful projects. In 30 years of business, I've learned that people reveal their true character in crisis. Eric's actions were inexcusable, but his response to being caught has been exemplary. He's taking responsibility, making restitution, and accepting consequences. He turned back to face me. However, there's a larger issue at stake here. Our partnership with Walters Construction is finished, obviously. But more importantly, I need to know that this situation won't affect your work with Richardson Development Group. I had been dreading this conversation, but I was prepared for it. Mr. Richardson, my marriage is separate from my career. Whatever happens between Eric and me personally won't affect my commitment to this company or to the projects we're building together. I hoped you'd say that. He returned to his seat, his expression softening slightly. Cheryl, you've become one of our most valuable assets. The Phoenix project is ahead of schedule and under budget. The women's investment fund you've created with Patricia is generating positive press and community support that money can't buy. Your work speaks for itself. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by a new determination. Thank you for your confidence in me. I won't let you down. I know you won't. But there is one more thing we need to discuss. Mr. Richardson pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. The board of directors has approved a new position, Vice President of Community Development. It's a significant promotion that would put you in charge of all Richardson Development Group projects that focus on community building and women's business support. I stared at the folder, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. Vice President? The salary is $650,000 annually, plus profit sharing and stock options. You'd have offices in Denver, Phoenix, and Los Angeles, with a budget of $50 million for community development projects across the western United States. The numbers were staggering. But more than that, the position represented everything I had dreamed of, the opportunity to use business success to create real change in women's lives across the country. There's one condition, Mr. Richardson continued. This position requires extensive travel and long hours. You'd essentially be building a new division of the company from the ground up. I need to know that you can handle the personal pressures that come with this level of responsibility. I thought about Eric, about the marriage counseling sessions we had been attending, about the house he had bought with stolen money, and about the future I had been trying to rebuild with him. Then I thought about the Women's Investment Fund, about the businesses we were supporting, about the communities we were building. I can handle it, Mr. Richardson. This is what I've been working toward my entire career. He smiled and slid the folder across my desk. Then congratulations, Vice President Walters. Your first board meeting is Monday morning. That afternoon, I drove to the Cherry Hills property where Eric was meeting with contractors about canceling renovation projects and preparing the house for sale. The house was beautiful, a sprawling contemporary design with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Rocky Mountains that took my breath away. Eric met me in the driveway, his face showing the strain of the past 24 hours. Thank you for coming, Cheryl. I know you didn't have to. We walked through the house together, and I could see the care Eric had put into every detail. The master bedroom with a fireplace and private balcony, the home office with built-in bookshelves and a view of the mountains, the chef's kitchen with professional-grade appliances, and a breakfast nook where we could have shared coffee and morning conversations. It's beautiful, Eric, I said honestly, but you built it with stolen money. I know. God, Cheryl, I know how wrong I was. I was so desperate to show you that I could provide for you, that I could give you the life you deserved, that I lost sight of everything that actually mattered. We stood in the empty living room, surrounded by the remnants of Eric's grand romantic gesture. "Eric, I have something to tell you about my career." I explained about the promotion, about the new position and its demands, about the travel schedule and the responsibility that would consume most of my time for the foreseeable future. Eric listened without interrupting, his face cycling through emotions I couldn't quite read. When I finished, he was quiet for several minutes. "So, this is it," he said finally. "This is where you tell me that you're choosing your career over our marriage." "No, Eric. This is where I tell you that I've chosen myself over the idea of marriage as self-sacrifice. The question is whether you can love the woman I actually am, or whether you're still trying to love the woman you think I should be." Eric walked to the window, looking out at the view he had hoped we would share. "I've been going to therapy twice a week since this all started. Dr. Miller has helped me understand that my behavior toward you wasn't just thoughtless. It was a systematic attempt to diminish you, because your strength threatened my sense of control." He turned back to face me. "I don't know if I can be the husband you deserve, Cheryl, but I know that I love who you've become, even if it means you don't need me anymore." The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. "Eric, I never needed you to diminish yourself for my success. I needed you to celebrate it. I know that now. The question is whether it's too late." I walked to where he stood by the window, and for a moment, we looked out at the mountains together in silence. "The divorce papers are in my car, Eric. I've had them for 2 weeks. His face went pale. And I also have papers for a legal separation that would allow us to live apart while you continue therapy, and I establish myself in this new position. At the end of a year, we could choose to reconcile or finalize the divorce." Eric turned to study my face. "What do you want to do, Cheryl?" It was the first time in 43 years of marriage that he had asked me what I wanted without trying to influence my answer. "I want to find out if the man I fell in love with 43 years ago is still somewhere inside the man who was so afraid of losing me that he was willing to steal to keep me." Eric nodded slowly. A year. No contact except through attorneys and therapists. You get your life together, I build my career, and then we see if there's anything left to build on." As we walked out of the house that would never be our home, I felt the weight of 43 years of marriage shifting into something I couldn't yet define. It wasn't an ending, but it wasn't a continuation either. It was the space between what was and what might be possible, and for the first time in my life, that space belonged entirely to me. 1 year later, I stood in my corner office on the 40th floor of the Richardson Building in Los Angeles, looking out at a skyline that bore the marks of transformation. In the past 12 months, the Community Development Division had launched projects in 17 cities, provided startup capital to 127 women-owned businesses, and generated over $200 million in economic development across the western United States. My assistant, Maria, knocked on my door with a familiar smile. "Mrs. Walters, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Should I send her in?" "Please, Maria. And could you bring the celebration champagne from the office refrigerator?" The woman who entered my office was someone I almost didn't recognize. Sarah Walters, or rather, Sarah Walters Chen, as she now went by professionally, had transformed from the uncertain daughter who rarely called home into a confident architect and businesswoman who had just opened her own firm in Seattle. "Aunt Cheryl!" Sarah rushed across the office to embrace me, using the title she had adopted during our year of separation from Eric. "I can't believe it's finally official." In her hands were the documents that made her the newest partner in Walters Chen Community Architecture, a firm that specialized in designing affordable housing and community centers for underserved populations. The startup capital had come from the Women's Investment Fund. Patricia and I had expanded into a national organization. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. Your father would be—" I caught myself, the automatic reference to Eric still coming naturally, despite our year of separation. "He is proud of me," Sarah said gently. "I had lunch with him yesterday in Denver. He's different, Cheryl, really different." Over the past year, Eric had sold not only the Cherry Hills house, but also his share of the construction company to his partners. He had used the money to repay Richardson Development Group and to establish a foundation that provided business ethics training to small construction companies across Colorado. The man who had once stolen money to buy my love was now teaching other business owners about integrity and accountability. "How is he?" I asked, the question I had been avoiding for months finally finding its way out. He's good, clean, honest. He's been working with Dr. Miller on understanding how his behavior affected not just you, but everyone around him. He's also been volunteering at a women's shelter, helping with construction projects and home repairs. Sarah sat down across from my desk, her expression growing serious. Cheryl, he asked me to give you something. She handed me an envelope with my name written in Eric's familiar handwriting. I hadn't heard from him directly since the day we had signed the separation papers, though I had followed his progress through Sarah and occasionally through Patricia, who maintained a relationship with her son despite his mistakes. He also asked me to tell you that whatever you decide about your marriage, he's grateful for the year of separation. He said it gave him the chance to become someone worthy of the woman you've always been. I set the envelope aside, not ready to open it in front of Sarah. And what do you think, Sarah? About your father? About the changes he's made? Sarah considered the question carefully. I think he spent 43 years trying to be the man he thought he was supposed to be, instead of the man he actually was. The therapy, the volunteer work, the foundation. It's all helped him figure out who he is when he's not trying to control everyone around him. Maria knocked and entered with champagne glasses and a bottle I had been saving for exactly this moment. As we toasted Sarah's success, I thought about the conversation I would have with Patricia later that evening about expanding the investment fund into international markets. There's something else I need to tell you, Sarah said as we sipped our champagne. Grandma Patricia has decided to write her memoir. She wants to call it The Silent Revolution, How 3 Generations of Women Found Their Voices. The idea of Patricia sharing her story, and by extension mine and Sarah's, was both thrilling and terrifying. Does she plan to include everything? Your father's embezzlement, our separation, the business empire? Everything. She says that women need to hear honest stories about what it takes to claim their own power, even when it means disappointing the people they love. After Sarah left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Los Angeles, finally opening Eric's letter. His handwriting was the same, but the words were from a man I had never known. Cheryl, the letter began. I know I have no right to ask anything of you after the pain I've caused, but I wanted you to know who I've become during this year, apart from you. I've learned that the man who dismissed your intelligence, who mocked your capabilities, who stole money to buy your affection, was not someone worthy of your love. I've learned that I spent 43 years trying to diminish you because I was afraid of being eclipsed by your light. I've also learned that loving someone means celebrating their success, not trying to contain it. It means supporting their dreams, not limiting them to fit your comfort zone. If you're willing to consider rebuilding our marriage, I want you to know that I'm no longer the man who introduced you as someone who's only good for cleaning the house and keeping quiet. I'm someone who would be honored to be introduced as the husband of Cheryl Walters, Vice President of Community Development at Richardson Development Group, founder of the National Women's Investment Fund, and the woman who has created opportunities for thousands of women across the country. But if you've decided that our marriage can't be rebuilt, I want you to know that I'm grateful for the time we had together and proud of everything you've accomplished. You deserve a love that celebrates your strength instead of trying to diminish it. Whatever you decide, I will respect your choice and continue working to become a man worthy of the woman you've always been. With love and respect, Eric. I set the letter down and walked to my office window, looking out at the city where I had built a life beyond anything I had ever imagined possible. In the distance, I could see the construction lights of the latest community development project, affordable housing for single mothers, designed by Sarah's firm and funded through the investment fund Patricia and I had created. My phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Richardson. Cheryl, the board has approved the international expansion. Congratulations on your promotion to senior vice president. The world is waiting for what you'll build next. As I read the message, I realized that the decision about Eric and our marriage was just one choice among many I would make as I continued building the life I had always deserved. For the first time in my adult life, I had the power to choose love on my own terms, or to choose the independence that had proven so fulfilling. The revolution that had begun with a humiliating dinner party had transformed not just my life, but the lives of thousands of women across the country. The silent housewife was gone forever, replaced by a woman who had learned that true power comes not from diminishing others, but from elevating them. Whether Eric would be part of this new chapter or whether I would continue writing it alone remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, the choice was entirely mine to make, and that made all the difference. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey of transformation and empowerment. If this story has inspired you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories of women who dared to reclaim their power. Leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Remember, it's never too late to discover who you really are when you stop pretending to be less than you are. Until next time, keep building your own revolution.